Damn, good morning, guys. Let me finish my salad and then we'll talk about the suitcase, okay? Anyway, chicken strips, mixed salad, a bit of yogurt sauce, just a little salt, a little bit of oil. It's wonderful. All right. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the suitcase. The same suitcase full of analog and digital cameras that accompanied me to Rome to record a TV show that, in my opinion, isn't even worthy of being called a TV show, where the artist was supposed to be valued, but in reality, it's always the same old commercial bullshit. But that's another story. There's a dedicated video about it. See you after the intro. Hey folks, welcome back to the Noisen channel. Today we're talking about this self-made suitcase. When it comes down to it, what you're seeing here is nothing more than custom cut wood, aluminum corner pieces, and lots of 3D printed components, like these corners or these feet you see here, or even these things underneath, which serve both as supports for the suitcase and when you open it, act as stops to set the angle of the top part. The upper part of this suitcase organ contains all the connected machines inside, while underneath, let me show you by turning it around for a second. Here underneath there's a mixer, the keyboard, and all the various effects and useful things you need to actually play with your hands. In fact, as we can see from this side here, this part can be removed to allow us to play. But enough with those who don't show things, come on. Let's open this suitcase and see what's inside, guys. But before we continue, I have to tell you that it's still under construction at the moment. In fact, I'll leave all the links in the description below to all the various topics I've already covered about building this suitcase. And after we open it, I'll talk to you in detail about each one, like the battery, for example. This is a battery that we built ourselves with our own hands, and it powers this whole system for 5 or 6 hours. In short, we've got plenty of time to play. Inside the suitcase, we'll also have other things that we've built ourselves with 3D printing and so on, and we'll see that in a moment. But I'm making this small preface because, for example, there are still many details missing before we can call it final. One detail in particular is these corner pieces, which need to be redesigned and reassembled. Maybe make them into a sphere or something like that, as if it were a hard case like this one, or even better, a hard case like this one you can see here, where we have this kind of anti-shock sphere. Also, just the other day, I went to the Chinese store and bought 2 of these little wheels here. These will be used for transport because this suitcase is heavy, and after my experience in Rome, carrying it by hand for 1.5 kilometers, there's a dedicated video about that experience. I really realized that I made a huge mistake by not immediately installing wheels for transport. So, there are still a few details to sort out with this VolcaLigia, but I'd say now it's time to open it. It stays closed only thanks to these 2 small hinges, which I'll probably replace in the future because they're ugly and not very reliable. Anyway, let's open hinge 1, open hinge 2, and at this point, all you have to do is lift the top part. As we can see, when you open it, everything is already set up to play, everything is completely wired. The only thing left to do is plug in the headphones or the master output. At the moment, there are also some balancing issues, as we can see. Let's say that if the surface is perfectly flat, it stays put. In this case, the surface isn't perfectly flat, so when I open the case, it tilts backward, and this is also something else to fix, either by adding weights or by reducing this locking angle, basically. There's a lot of work to do on this case. For now, I'm solving it by keeping the base slightly tilted toward the camera. At this point, I also have the light bulb. This one comes from the Action 4 DJ video. Go check it out, it's really interesting. Accessories for DJs and more at the Action Store, a really interesting little shop. Let's remove this front part, and now our case is completely exposed. Here we have the keyboard, here we have the mixer, and various pedal effects. Basically everything. Now I'll show it to you in detail, okay? Of course, before showing it to you in detail, let's hook up a power supply and turn everything on. The power supply goes right here, so let's start right here from the Korg Volca power box V2. There's a dedicated video about how this box was built, why it was made, and so on. I'll leave it for you down below in the description. Anyway, I'll plug everything in and turn all this stuff on. As we can see, the USB ports are powered right away, so the keyboard, this device, the MIDI box, and the mixer are powered immediately, as well as the 2 pedals. From this small display on the Korg Volca power box, we can see the remaining voltage inside our battery. As I already mentioned in the dedicated Korg Volca power box video, 12.6 means the battery is fully charged, 9.6 volts means we're right at the point where the battery is about to shut off, so you need to watch out. At 9.3, 9.2 volts, you have to unplug it, otherwise you'll ruin the battery. There's a video entirely dedicated to building it, so we won't go too much into detail about the power supply here. But it's only fair that you know that all this stuff is the result of months of work, okay? And all the projects you find here on this channel are free, open to everyone, because I believe it's right to share what we do. It's no coincidence that our event organization is called Free Techno Valley. Getting back to us, talking about the power supply, so how our entire VolcaLigia is powered, let's start with the battery that goes into the Korg Volca power box, which steps the voltage down to 9 volts, making it usable by all the devices here in our VolcaLigia. And not only does it lower the voltage, but it also further stabilizes it. But go watch the dedicated video. There's no point in me telling you the same things 100 times. So the power coming out of this Volca power box is distributed both to the 6 digital or analog machines, which we'll take a look at in a moment, not in detail, but we'll have a peek, and 3 other cables go to the lower section. What does the lower section mean? It means that there are 9 cables coming out of the Korg Volca power box. 6 power the 6 machines, while the other 3 come down here. One of the outgoing cables goes to this USB hub, which accepts an input voltage from 8 to 12 volts, so our Korg Volca power box, which outputs 9, is perfect. And from here, we pretty much have the ability to power any component via USB. In fact, we have this light bulb, for example, and the cable that powers the MIDI box. This here is a MIDI signal splitter, so you can control multiple machines with a single keyboard. The keyboard itself is powered through this USB cable that plugs in back there, basically. A second cable, on the other hand, goes directly to the polarity reversal box. There's also a dedicated video about this little box on the channel, though not specifically about it. Anyway, I explain a lot of things about powering, all the various electrotechnical contraptions, and all the stuff that went into making this project happen. You'll find everything on the channel, or at least you'll find everything down below in the description. I hope I remember to put all the links. The fact is, this polarity reversal box does nothing more than convert the input polarity. We go in with positive on the inside and negative on the outside of this connector, and we come out here with negative on the inside and positive on the outside. This cable then runs all the way over there, where we have a splitter with 2 more free jacks that goes on to power 2 effects pedals, which are, look at that, 2 pedals with reverse polarity, as we can see from this little diagram. In the future, in fact, I'll also add this pedal, which is a distortion pedal, and I just need to find space for it. Honestly, I need to reorganize everything a bit, unscrew and screw in a few wood screws, and find some space. That's it. It's worth noting that sooner or later, I'll move the Korg Volca power box to the lower part to make room for 2 more Volca machines. And then I'd say this suitcase will be full, it'll be really packed. I have a little confession, soon I'll be venturing into the world of true modular. And now I'll explain. Especially with the Volca new bass, one of the machines I use the most, which has this acid sound. I really love being able to do an LFO on its filters opening and closing, okay? The problem is that doing this LFO involves holding down the function button while moving a knob while you need to direct the LFO to the target, in this case, cutoff. It's very cumbersome, especially with one hand, since I like to play live, literally creating the melody by playing the keyboard. So with one hand, it's pretty much impossible to manage an LFO on any of this stuff. That's why, in the not too distant future, I'll add a part to this VolcaLigia, maybe a section here in the middle that detaches and mounts up here, I don't know, I have no idea, made up of literally modular systems. I'm not talking about little machines or anything like that, but actual modules, obviously Behringer, because I'm broke as hell. And what I'll do is start by converting an audio signal, so an audio signal coming from the new bass into a VC compatible signal for the Eurorack modular system, generate an LFO, and apply it to a cutoff filter or whatever else. In short, that's the idea, but for now, I'm still at a standstill in practice. But I'm moving forward with this project, and I think I'll use this method, that is applying a filter, or rather an effect, to the sounds coming from my Volcas using the Eurorack modular method. As a result, my first approach to the truly modular world will be to generate filters and effects. Let's see what happens. This is my idea. In my opinion, it's going to be awesome. We'll only find out as we go along. Anyway, getting back to us, we were talking about powering this stuff. The last cable that powers the bottom part of all this, guess where it goes? Into the mixer. There's also a dedicated video about this mixer on the channel. This is the Womix 10R2 by Tangible Waves, a 10-channel mixer, or rather 6 mono channels plus 2 stereo. Really solid, really excellent. Let's say that as far as power supply goes, there's nothing more to add. Everything you see is powered. Now we should talk about clock and audio. Let's start with audio. Actually, let's start with the clock, which is much simpler. Meanwhile, I'll turn on all the little machines to make it look cool. Let's start by asking ourselves, what is the clock? Well, maybe that's not even the right term to call it. I have no idea. The fact is that the clock is a signal, and let's say analog signal, literally a signal, I don't even know what kind of signal it is, that allows all our devices inside the Volca setup to be synchronized in terms of the song's speed, literally the BPM. You know, beats per minute, the famous BPMs, 130, 140, and so on. What does this mean? The 6 machines are literally a chain. One works with the other. We're still talking about the clock here, so about the synchronization signal between them, okay? Besides the machines, we also have the keyboard, which is synced to the machines because the keyboard has its own internal sequencer that can be useful in certain situations. It goes without saying that all the machines are connected to each other, so if I change one, they all change. Exactly. Then I want to point this out first by showing you the Korg Volca chain, where it starts and where it ends. This machine, the Korg Volca kick, is the one that literally generates the kick, the pum-pum, pump. And this machine is the first in the chain. In fact, if we look up here, it says sync in out. The import is free because it doesn't have any incoming signal. It's the one that literally generates the clock. The out, on the other hand, then goes to the next machine. This one, for example, ends up here, so it goes into the sample 2. Then from sample 2, it goes out and ends up in the bass. Then from the bass, it goes out and ends up in the bits. Then from the bits, it goes out and so on and so forth until it reaches the keyboard through this jack we have here where there's only an input and no output. In the end, this allows us to control the speed of our track by turning a single knob. Which one? This one, guys, tempo. You see this little knob that's blinking? Tempo. If I turn it, 130, look at the little screen, 133, 134, those are the BPM, beats per minute. Let's do a silly and practical example. Now I'm going really low down to 80 BPM. The light blinks at 80 beats per minute. Let's go to the last machine in the chain, or even these two, and now I'm going to turn up this knob and you'll see how the tempo knob will start blinking faster. Now we're at 240, I think. What's the maximum? Yes, 240 BPM. We can see how the light bulb is really going crazy. So once we've explained the clock, now we can talk about MIDI. It's something super quick, really, just a super quick thing about MIDI. I will never stop thanking all the guys from Synth Cafe who help me out and support me. It's a Facebook group that's really, really useful for anyone who wants to learn how to do this analog stuff. The fact is, in that group, they explained to me that thanks to a MIDI through, which could be something like this box here, in this case, this box from Door MIDI, I'll leave the link in the description. It costs very little and is actually really good. And on top of that, it can also be programmed via software. I don't know what that's for, but you can program it via software. Basically, we send out a MIDI signal from our keyboard using a standard MIDI cable, like this one here, literally a classic MIDI cable. We plug it into the MIDI in port, and then we have a splitter. This signal is copied to all the ports you want. In this case, we even have up to 6 output ports. Okay, I have these tabs here that take up a couple of them, but just to say, I actually use 3 because the machines I use for melody are 3, 1, 2, 3. With the other 3 machines I use for drums, I don't really need to have a keyboard for them. In any case, I assigned a MIDI channel to each of these machines, specifically channel 1, channel 2, and channel 3 MIDI. So when I go to my keyboard and deliberately press the shift key along with either key 1, key 2, or key 3, as you can clearly observe and see up here, specifically 1, 2, and 3, I am effectively selecting the precise MIDI channel on which this particular keyboard should then proceed to send all of its musical notes and indeed transmit the entire signal data. As a result, when I go in here, the signal isn't sent to all 3 machines at the same time, but only to the machine I choose, depending on whether I'm playing on MIDI channel 1, MIDI channel 2, or MIDI channel 3. In this case, that's because I have 3 machines that make use of this feature. Thanks to the key step 25, we can actually go up to 16 MIDI channels, which is a lot, really a lot. And thanks to this Door MIDI splitter, we can control up to 6 different machines. I didn't think there would be so much to say about this little suitcase, but apparently there is, and we're not done yet because now we're going to talk about the audio. And lastly, I'd say I'll just mention the 3D printed components. I'll leave all the links to download them and so on down in the description. Let's talk about audio. As I mentioned earlier, here we have the VuMix 10. There's a dedicated video about this mini mixer, which has the same format and shape as the Korg Volca, exactly the same size as these Korg Volca machines. So the cool thing is that here we have 6 machines. Each of these machines has its own channel within the mixer. In fact, as we can see, the mixer has the first 6 channels all occupied, and they're occupied precisely by them, the 6 machines present here. Nothing stops us from using, for example, channel 7 or 8 together with an external mixer like this one to bring in other instruments, a vocal, a percussion drum, or whatever else into our VuMix 10 and consequently create performances together with friends, other artists, or whoever. In short, it's a cool thing. This thing is designed to be expanded, okay? It's meant to be expanded. Of course, it will always remain a vocal instrument, but externally, you just need to plug in a cable, that's all. No matter how messy we are, we try to keep it together. Now, I'm not going to explain in detail how a mixer works because you know it better than I do. What you need to know is that the VuMix 10 is really cool because it also has 2 send and return for an effects section, of which I'm currently using one. We have an output that goes into this pedal, This is a pedal that does looping. It only and exclusively does looping, so it starts recording the loop, and when you press it, it repeats what you've recorded endlessly, and you press it again to delete the loop. From here, the audio signal comes out and is actually processed by this double effect, 2-in-1, where we have a reverb and a delay that can be turned on or off individually, and you can adjust the various parameters. That aside, once the pedal is set up, you don't really need to touch it much anymore because you have both a master control for the effects one send, and for each individual channel, the ability to decide how much effect to apply. On FX2, so a second send in return for an external effects unit, I'll be using the distortion pedal I showed you earlier. We'll see. Sooner or later I'll do it. I just need to literally find the space for it. To wrap up, I'd say that for outputs, we have both a main out controlled by this knob, which also gives us visual feedback through these LEDs that act as a VU meter. And in addition, we also have a dedicated headphone output specifically for playing without a monitor speaker if needed. And at this point, guys, I'd like to point out those two little things, those two 3D printed details and so on, just to show you how I physically built this case that accompanied me all the way to Rome, guys. I mean, it's traveled a lot of kilometers. As I mentioned earlier, we have these feet here. For example, these here are feet that are completely 3D printed. I printed them in Ace, and they're screwed into the piece of wood with a little screw inside. Nothing special. These corner pieces, on the other hand, are really ugly. They are specifically designed, leaving a space for the aluminum profile, mind you, but they're ugly because it would actually be cool to make a ball there, like I showed you earlier. And on top of that, we need to add some wheels somewhere, so it's still in the design phase. I'll leave you all the files for 3D printing anyway, so if you want, you can already start building your own VolcaDigi. If you want to replicate the project, if you want to improve it, in short, do whatever the hell you want. Other things to note are, for example, these H-shaped profiles, also 3D printed, which help us fit in that piece of wood I removed earlier. This is something you just pop in like this, and then when you close it, you have the suitcase closed. Otherwise, this space would remain open. So yeah, no. Last thing, here there's a dog collar that I bought from the Chinese store for the modest price of €1.50, attached to these two big 3D printed blocks, really thick and badass, each with 6 screws, which literally serve as a handle. As always, I'll leave all of this in the description. I've made 2 of these handles, one here and one here. This one is for carrying it horizontally, let's say, and that one is for vertical transport, which, thanks to the help of these 2 little wheels that I'll somehow mount somewhere around here, that handle placed on the opposite side of the case will also be used to drag, basically, the VolcaDigi. It might seem light, but try walking 1.5 kilometers in Rome under the morning sun, and trust me, you'll change your mind. I'm not going to explain the converter box, the Korg Volca power box, or the other electronic components here, because there are dedicated videos about them on the channel. Instead, let me talk to you about these simple little fins, all right? These are fins, just simple S-type ones, and as you can see, they're pretty much everywhere, and their only purpose is to hold everything down, from the keyboard to this thing here for the MIDI signal. They're simply there to keep everything in place so that nothing slips out. To conclude, the last 3D printed thing in this case are these little blocks we have here. These little blocks serve to provide an opening angle, as you can see, and when the case is closed, they also allow you to set the case down on the ground without damaging the case itself, or the wood, basically. Do you see how this angle is specifically designed? There you go. Simple, simple, simple. When you open it, they act as a stop for the maximum angle, and it's very convenient. There's this problem, as I mentioned earlier, that if I let go, the case falls because the table is uneven. Let's say that if we're perfectly level, the case stays put. I'd say at this point, we've talked more than enough about this case, so I'll see you in the next video. Bye, baby.